Let's go ahead. So just wanted to welcome everybody. We're really excited that you are joining us. If this is your first time, we're very happy you're here. Last week, we had a robust conversation about some really interesting topics, and I just wanted to go over the rule set so that we understand how we're handling all of these conversations remotely. So for 15 or 20 minutes, we're going to focus on 3 or 4 topics that you chose when we sent out the Survey Monkey. And Petra and I are here to moderate those conversations, and we're looking forward to hearing multiple opinions from multiple different institutions. So this is to be a very vibrant discussion, and we're going to share with you how you can participate. So go ahead, Petra, do you want to talk about the settings?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways we're going to do this so that we don't have 30-odd people competing to talk. So if you want to speak, then click the little raise your hand button that should be at the bottom of your screen. It may have disappeared and you may need to hover over it. By raising your hand, you'll go into this queue that I can see, and then I can call on you individually to talk. So what I'll do is I'll just permit you to talk and unmute you, and then you can talk and you can mute yourself again afterwards. So, you know, I will say, you know, Chuck Resnick, do you have a comment, et cetera, when they put their hands up. The other way to send in a question, so if you want to just like talk about something that you experience in your program, that's the best thing to do. If you want to just send in a quick note about something you're doing on your program relevant to the topic we're talking about, or you want to ask a question, then use the Q&A box. And either I will answer those within the Q&A box, or we'll leave them for Angelisa or myself or somebody else to answer verbally. So 2 different ways: you put your hand up or put it in the Q&A box. And I'm the geek on the line who gets to play with the buttons while Angelisa focuses on the conversation. It's difficult to do both. Okay.
And then the other thing we want you to know is all the comments that you write in the Q&A, we are summarizing and we will put on the APDR website after this seminar. Okay, thanks, Petra. So then our just simple rule set. So we just would appreciate you when you do raise your hand, please state your name and your institution so that everyone knows. And sometimes we found it helpful to know the size of your program, because we have program directors and program coordinators here from a variety of different settings. We would really appreciate you keeping your answers succinct, because we want as many people to be able to participate in each of the subjects that we're talking about. And if you have any need for a clarification, again, use that Q&A function that Petra shared with you so that we know and we can try to get that addressed. There might be an opportunity for us to poll the audience. We did that last time and it worked well. So if any of you want to poll the group by saying how many of you are going to be doing interviews virtually this year, what we can do is we can pose the question, and then everyone will then use the raise the hand button to answer that question. So we'll use that function as well today. Okay, so the 4 topics that everyone who is here would like to talk about. So the first one was altering schedules. The next one was the R1 pre-call experience. Several program directors and program coordinators are concerned about the MAMMO and iodine 131 requirement, and then looking ahead at interviews. Okay, so let's start with our altering schedules. Is there a volunteer that would like to raise their hand and discuss how they're addressing their schedule in response to COVID?
I don't see anyone at the moment. Why don't we ask, hey, Chuck, do you want to
yeah, I was gonna say.
Oh, everyone's getting the hang of it.
Yeah, thanks for calling on me first.
You're always welcome.
So we have had anywhere between 5 and 10 out of our 39 residents in-house every day since this began. We are up to 10 now, not because we're opening things up, but because we finally figured out where it was critical to have residents. And we added 2 first-year residents, which will go to number 2 on your list here about pre-call experience. And we have them social distanced and time distanced. So we have 1 first-year resident coming into the emergency department from 8 a.m. until 1 p.m., I believe, and then leaving, and a second one coming in at 1 p.m. and leaving at 5 or 6, whatever exact time it is. So they're actually getting to see, you know, how to triage things and what really happens in the ED, but they are not getting in the way of the more senior residents who are sitting much more than 6 feet away from
And Chuck, are you going to be altering the block schedule for the next year?
Hopefully not. The alteration in the block schedule relates more to the rescheduling of the core exam than it does COVID. I'm hoping that we're back in action for July. If not, we'll continue to do what we're doing now. We have a robust system of case sharing that allows our current first-year class to get a group of cases every day that they're doing mock preliminary dictations on, and then our more senior residents are having one-to-one meetings with the first-year residents to go over their dictations and explain what they did right, what they did wrong, what they can learn from the cases. We are particularly interested in MAMMO and nukes, not because of I-131 requirements, more for making sure that every senior resident has 12 weeks of MAMMO and 16 weeks of nukes. So we have started a virtual rotation in each of those areas where there are cases being shared and other activities that they're doing that allows me to be able to sign off and say, yes, you had your MAMMO rotation. Our case numbers are okay. Our I-131s, we have a couple of people who haven't made it. Their number.
We're just going to start with this first one. And
Yeah.
Sorry.
We'll get
That's okay.
You asked for it.
No, I hear you. We're wanting to have the program directors talk about altering their schedules. That was the one that people had, when we sent out the survey, that they wanted to talk most about. And Petra and I are trying to understand what people would like to talk about because altering schedules is obviously a big topic, but that came up time and time again.
All right, the short answer is no, we haven't altered our schedule.
Okay. Anybody else want to talk about altering their schedules?
Aaron Johnson, I'm just going to allow you to talk here.
Hey. All right, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Karen Johnson. I'm the program director at Duke, and we have a total of upwards of 50 residents. So during the COVID crisis, we went to a week on, week off sort of situation where we split up into teams. Our volumes dropped enough to allow that to happen. And so the idea there was to only contaminate your team members and not the other team members. And so we had a team X and team Y, and the entire department did this: faculty, techs, residents, everything. So every service essentially was running at half staff, and still is, except for interventional radiology, because their volumes really have not been affected. And we haven't changed the call schedule, and we haven't changed weekend schedules. This was just a daytime thing. We're planning on trying to come out of teams on May 18th. That's the date that the hospital has set to start doing elective procedures again, and see how it goes on sort of a case-by-case basis, some sort of strategic way. What I would really like to be interested in hearing is if anyone else is on a team sort of situation or a limited schedule where they were adhering to social distancing measures, but are going back to some sort of normalcy, and how they plan to maintain social distancing, but sort of more at a full staffing, if anyone's doing that or thought of a creative way to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. That's a great question. Are there any program directors in the audience that are similar to Karen's program, in which their governor has said and the hospital leadership is planning to go back to elective surgeries, so volumes should go up, and how they plan to maintain the social distancing with more than half staff?
Shana Matalon, I'm used to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm from Bergman Women's Hospital. I'm one of the associate program directors. We haven't yet talked about how we're going to do this, but we have set up, basically, we've taken away pack stations from the various reading rooms and like spread them around the hospital into people's offices, into unused conference rooms, things like that. And so we've been able to keep all the pack stations at least 6 feet apart, so that when we do go back to full staffing, we'll be able to keep everyone physically separate when that time comes.
How are you planning? So we're doing a similar thing in our institution, and we're just trying to have, if possible, only, definitely a 6 foot apart in the reading rooms, but communicating with the resident if they're not in the same room as you. How are you planning to do it to make sure that they're fully involved with reading the cases?
That's a great question. So that's actually what we've been doing for the past like 4 or 5 weeks now, with residents and fellows. So basically one resident or fellow is assigned to each attending every day, and we read out either through Microsoft Teams, where you can do screen sharing. You can allow someone to take control. So if they're sharing their screen, but they don't see what you're talking about, you can take control and show them the findings. So it's very close to side-by-side readouts. And then for the more senior residents and fellows, we've actually used this time to give them like a little bit more autonomy. And so we've allowed them to sort of read, and then we'll review the cases asynchronously and provide them feedback as needed, either through Teams or through, we have Primordial, which has like a little messenger system, so we can use that. So that's kind of how we've been doing it now, and probably how we'll have to do it in the future until social distancing can be removed.
Anybody else want to? Karen, I think you want to say something new?
Oh, that was an accident.
Okay.
Sorry.
I hear birds.
Oh, sorry. I have to unmute. I have.
Very good.
Are you in a tropical location?
No, nothing that glamorous.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
No, that was cute.
Jordan.
Yeah, hi, Sherry Jordan, UNC. So I have the same governor that Karen's got right down Tobacco Road here, and we have a program of basically 40 of us. Nine of our residents have 4G monitors at home, and so some of them will continue to read at home. And we've already rearranged our reading rooms to be able to socially distance. So we, just like Karen, are preparing to come out of it, same governor. And I think we'll probably be ready. I don't think we're anticipating that the doors are going to open and lots of patients are going to come flooding in. I think it's going to be a bit more of a ramp up. But that's how we're going to accomplish it. Does anybody have anybody with sufficient monitors at home? The encumbrance for us is actually the dictation system, and how kind of slow that can be with our Power Scribe as a non-embedded at home, at least trying to read through Epic.
Yeah, that was a couple of questions also from May. Ellsby had asked if their residents doing remote reading, so similar to what she was just talking about. So there are other program directors that would like to know if people have computers at home or IT IT support to be doing that type of readouts.
Carol Gear.
You guys hear me?
Yes,
You can hear me?
we can.
Oh, good. Sorry, because I'm actually out of PAC, so I'm not in my office. I'm with Karen and Sherry in the same state with the same governor, although I'm in Winston-Salem, which is a little bit smaller, and we are actually doing elective cases starting Monday. And what we've done, similar to what Brigham and Women's is doing, we've been using Microsoft Teams, which works really well, or some people are using WebEx, but we're in different rooms and screen sharing so that we've been able to move our junior residents to new rotations. And that actually works pretty well, especially for places that are maybe not, that are going to have to stay really distanced for a lot longer than I think in North Carolina.
Yeah, can you give some details? Can you be a little bit more specific? So if you are using WebEx or the screen sharing, so do they just sit, so do they just show they bring up a case and then just go over it like they're sitting next to one another?
Yeah, so we just started using the Microsoft Teams, believe it or not, today, but the WebEx is what we've been using the last 5 weeks. And all you have to do, that is actually pretty easy. If you will have, say, the faculty member has their own WebEx account, and you just invite the resident you're going to read out to a meeting, okay? And they're on a meeting, and you just share your PAC screen with them, and you just go over their cases. We're using the telephone just so that the one other person in the reading room can't hear our readout, because like everybody else, we're way social distance with PACs spread out all over the department so that we're not near each other. But it is almost as good as reading out right next to them, because you just share your own PACS monitor, you pull up their list that they've looked at, and you just go through the cases, and you talk to them. They can see your mouse moving and what you're pointing out, and then they can correct their report and send it to you. And it works pretty well.
And where are they? Are they at home then?
No,
or are they?
So they're here at the hospital in a reading room, usually with only one other person at the far end of the reading room. The faculty member is often in a whole nother room. So we're very distanced. So we're often reading, and some faculty members are at home with a monitor. I'm not. I'm at the hospital in another room. So that's why we're on the phone with them, but sharing our screen. And it has worked really well.
Thank you. Just for some people. And then there's some questions similar. Jenny Core from Virginia Mason brought up a good point. She's wondering if anyone's considering sitting less than 6 feet, but still just wearing surgical masks. Justin Fedrick answered her and said, we're considering it since our residents are required to attest daily to no fever, cough, or shortness of breath. And both they and the attendings will be wearing masks. So I'm just bringing that up as a different type of solution. And would anybody else like to, so it sounds like you can physically distance between being at home or being 6 feet apart all over the hospital, but are there other institutions that are thinking about wearing masks and using this attestation? Would anybody like to speak to that?
Sherry, hang on a second.
Going.
Yeah, at UNC, we actually are putting up some soft dividers, and we are wearing masks and gloves, and we're putting up some soft dividers for some of the distances that feel close to us. Because, you know, when you're rolling your chair around, you're not necessarily going to stay at the whole 6 feet thing, especially in MAMMO where I'm a breast imager, where we're popping up like toast to go and speak to a patient or whatever. So we have 3 soft dividers going into our specific reading room. I don't even know if that's been medically proven to work, but we're going to do it for some of the smaller reading rooms. And we're all wearing masks and gloves anyway.
You have to wear gloves, Sherry? How often do you change them? I've been thinking about the gloves bit.
Yeah, I think it's because Petra, I'm not really sure. I don't think we have to wear gloves, but just a lot of people in our division have adopted them, in part because we're using those wipes that seem a little toxic to people. You know, the purple, whatever's in the purple and whatever's in the red. And because we're doing ultrasound as much as we are, I'd be interested to see what other people's experience is with all the wipe downs that that places are encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't have eczema yet. I know what you mean. Yeah, some of them no. I mean, we'll wear gloves to wipe, but we don't usually wear them, you know, typing on the computer and things, because your hands get so horrible and sweaty. And I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel that I'd rather wash my hands thoroughly and use Purell than have a pair of gloves on the whole time that is probably just as contaminated. Justin Frederick.
Can you hear me?
You can.
Perfect.
Yes.
So I was answering Ginny's question. I'm at Providence Sacred Heart Medical Center. So I'm on the eastern part of Washington State, but under the same course Governor Inslee here in the state. And back to the question regarding mask and social distancing. We spoke with our director of medical education here at Providence Sacred Heart, because we have other residency programs here as well, internal medicine, family practice, OB-GYN fellowship, and a couple other things. And they felt that just doing their normal hospital rounds, of course, you know, they do the attestation daily and wear masks, but they can't stay 6 feet apart when they're doing ICU rounds or anything else. And so she thought that it wasn't necessarily critical for us to maintain that full 6 feet of distance if we had masks and we're doing attestations. And that's why we've been given permission to go ahead to do readouts on an interpersonal level, if we so choose. And like I said, that came from our director of medical education.
That's a good point, Justin. Maybe it would be best, I'm sure different hospitals will have different policies. So it's something as program directors and program coordinators can think about is reaching out to their GME and finding out if hospital leadership would approve of that approach.
Any other comments on this topic?
Or thoughts? Did anybody have something else in mind for altering schedules besides?
Jennifer, Jennifer, there you go.
Okay. This is Jenny Core. I was the one that asked the question about the less than 6 feet. I am calling from Virginia Mason in Seattle, and we have 12 total residents. The other thing I've been kind of thinking about in terms of the rotation block schedule starting for the next academic year, we've gone ahead and just made it as usual. But one of my thoughts, and one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this is, has anyone kind of come up with like contingency plan for where to, you know, if there's another surge or another round of this, for given the new academic year, where to pull residents? Or I've been thinking about coming up with some plan so I don't have to reinvent the wheel again, and something probably less, we pulled quite a few residents off, something less restrictive than we did before.
So yeah, I was also thinking when Karen spoke, when she had teams of A and B, Karen, I believe you were, did that mean that they were completely off, or that they were reading at home? Like you just had people, you just wanted to have a few people in the hospital, but everyone was still working, or if it meant that that workforce was basically furloughed?
Who was it who talked about that?
I thought it was Duke.
Who's I can't remember who Duke is. Karen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Karen.
Is she still on? Maybe she's not on anymore. But
I'm here. Can you hear me?
yeah. Yes.
Okay. So we went to the team approach in an effort to be able to socially distance and stay 6 feet apart to reduce the number of people in the reading rooms. And with the idea that, you know, I guess when we started the whole thing, we were envisioning everybody getting COVID and people getting sick and needing to be out of work. And so the idea was that, again, if you were on a team and you became COVID positive, it was readily easy to recognize who you would have been in contact with, and who you weren't in contact with. And so there was always like a backup team to come in, I guess, and rescue the team that might be having to quarantine. As far as what the residents did on their off weeks, it was very loose, I have to admit. I mean, there were definitely conferences, you know, maybe 2 or 3 a day that all the residents were expected to attend, whether they were on an off week or an on week. You know, some rotations were instructed to give their residents different reading material, like radiographic articles, AJR, radiology, that sort of thing. But there wasn't any true expectation, to be honest, for the residents that were on an off week. Does that answer the question?
Yes. So Jenny, so is that what you mean? Are you trying to think about how you're going to set up teams in the future? Just
Angelisa.
I think that's, oh, can you hear me okay?
yeah.
Okay. I guess what
I'm trying to distill your question, or so that other people can help you come up with, are you asking what type of, how people handled the different?
Actually, I think I'm asking more about, for example, would they go back to a team approach? So let's say that we need to deal with this again. I imagine hopefully things would be not exactly the same and we'd have a little bit more time. But for example, if I look at my schedule, my rotation schedule, I could say, okay, I could pull, because we did the same thing. We pulled residents off thinking we needed to have healthy residents at home available to come in if we needed them, if a lot of people were getting sick. Now maybe it would be more for volumes are down and potentially we want to keep residents. Same idea is to look at the rotation schedule for the year ahead and say, okay, we could spare residents from these rotations. This would be kind of our plan if kind of have something in place already. That's what does that make sense?
I mean, we're altering our schedule for the first years mostly, in that we're trying to make sure that they have early ultrasound blocks because our residents have to scan on call. And we've moved their night floats to later in the year so that they have a little, you know, they've been a little more time for getting up to speed when hopefully they're back on the floor. So we have made that change to our block schedule. I don't think we've made any other drastic ones, and we are not changing it for the core exam other than because they've had plenty of time to study in the last few weeks. Should we move on?
Yeah, should we move on to the R1 pre-call experience? I think Chuck had started to talk about how he was using his R1s to come in and basically look at it on a 2-shift system. Is that correct, Chuck? Is that you were having them come in shifts and observe?
Yeah, observe and participate, because as you all probably know, the most important thing is for them to learn how to multitask. And it's not the same if you aren't there. So we've been doing this for several years with our first-year residents before they start taking real call in July. And we were afraid that they wouldn't have that opportunity this year. So we just figured out that we would have them come in short shifts so that they're all going to get the same pre-call experience that they would have if COVID didn't exist.
We're doing, Chuck, we have baby call and buddy call. Baby call is they come in for just a couple of hours, and we do that in the fall through the end of the year. And then starting in January, they started doing buddy call when they're on with another resident, and you know, they can only draft, not prelim reports, obviously. And we've had them continue to do that through COVID. We felt that, you know, in the evenings we have tons of reading rooms free, and that wasn't an issue. We just didn't think that them staying home and having no experience was going to be a good idea long term. Anyone got some other ideas about that? What they're going to do for their first years? We will have them take, we've had them continue to all take their RAD exams, and we will be giving, there is a first year, an R1 pre-call RAD exam. It's about 100 questions that is in the RAD exam library, which is one you might want to think about giving to them. It gives them another case. They also did the WIDI test. Anyone, any thoughts on how to make sure that our first years are up to speed for starting as second years?
I'm going to call on Jennifer. Jennifer Gold, I see you're on from WashU, and you have a large program. I'm interested in how you're going to be getting your R1s. Can you share with the group? I'm putting her on the spot.
Jennifer, you can talk now.
Sorry, I am taking care of dogs and kids at the same time as I'm doing this. So I think our situation was maybe a little different. My faculty clearly wanted to scatter to the ends of the earth, but most of them did want to take residents and continue to engage them. So I would say about half of my residents, or a little bit more, are working in some capacity on any given day. The rest are at home. But we've built out most of the day with a variety of lectures, not just our usual noon conference and our usual conferences, but my faculty are at home are expected to provide conferences during that time. And our GME was very insistent that everybody had to remain clinically active or we would not get CMS reimbursement. So each of them has some type of a clinical duty each day. I am pushing more to put junior residents into the on-site rotations and leave my senior residents at home. I want to make sure my people are ready for call on July 1 because we don't really have any plans to alter our schedule. I don't even know how I could do it. And have it not just fall apart this next year, even so.
That's a good point about placing your juniors, focusing more on getting them in-house. That's a good idea.
It looks like Sherry's got some ideas of what she was doing. Sherry,
thanks, Jennifer.
Sherry Jordan, do you want to talk about what you've been putting in the Q&A?
Oh my gosh, after all that typing. Yeah, it went great. I was prepared in part because I'm a breast imager and in part because we'd already run these diagnostic sim labs in June. In our call pool for our brand new R2s, we have long done an analysis of what they're actually going to see, right? And it turns out even now with all of their, with all of the time and attention they have to direct to CT scans, the very first the predominant things that they read on call happen to be plain films, right? It's when we first did the analysis a few years ago, it was like 75% plain films, 25% CTs. And so like way back in 2015, we were like, okay, let's establish a comfort level with all of the fairly straightforward diagnostic cases you're going to see, and therefore you'll be able to spend more time and attention on these CT cases that are far more complicated and take far more time. And so fast forward to 2020, we already had these sim labs kind of set up. We certainly had the cases set up. And so we were able to launch our pre-call sim labs, which usually occur in June, actually. We started them early. We obviously had to start them with a bit lower expectation, or at least the expectation that the residents are going to be a bit slower because the R1s, you know, had barely waked up after Christmas or whenever all this started. It feels like it was 3 months ago now. So we finished already. We did 10 R1 sim labs, diagnostic side only. We're going to pick up and do our CTs pretty soon, and we started with just the simple diagnostic cases, very bread and butter. it was hot seat format, and even that was helpful for us because these R1s haven't taken a lot of cases and verbalized them out loud, or at least ours had not. They were all unknowns. We used WebEx in the beginning before we all got more Zoom savvy, and then we switched over to Zoom. We used a lot of the exact same tips that Carol had described in terms of rapid readout, although these were not rapid readouts. They were rapid case reviews though. And then it was a safe space for them. It was only the R1s and honestly me. So there were 11 of us. There was often a guest speaker though. So a guest attending would come in, for instance, for extremities or for we actually had a COVID session. So we had one of our faculty who does more COVID work that came in for the COVID session. And we got through 300 cases. We did the rad exam, radiography only after. And by the end of it, they had had enough of plain films, as had everybody virtually that was anywhere even peripherally involved with it. But they're organizing and redeploying for the CTs as well. So it was good, and it accomplished that goal that I think many of us have, which is that it's a little bit like oral boards. So anyway, that's it. We have the curriculum and everything if anybody wants to take a look at it.
Definitely. Sherry, did you do this with PACS cases, or were you in the PACS system, or you just had them all in a big PowerPoint format?
No, we actually had everybody log on. That's the reason all the R1s have 4G monitors, right? So we had everybody log on, and I had pulled them all into a bucket. And in fact, we even renamed the bucket itself as a scheduled work list, the R1 conference work list. They were even proud about that they had their own bucket. And I didn't pull them in early. I pulled them in right before the meeting started so that they were, in fact, unknowns for them. They stay in the bucket, so they went back and reviewed. And I had a little post-session send for each one of them. And yeah, I think in general, we would say that it was successful. And it did simulate because, they had to look at the case themselves. On the one hand, on the other hand, I had no way of knowing what they were actually looking at because, we were remote from one another. So who knows? They did well on the rad exam, so they learned something. Let's put it that way.
Great. Does anybody else want to share how they're preparing their R1s for call in these times?
There's one question still up there, Angeli, so I left.
Yeah, it says, how are people planning to move forward with resident rotation schedules once the volumes pick up? How will you address, specifically, how will you address missed rotations and competency?
That's kind of tough. You've only got your 13 months, right? So 13 rotations.
Right. Yeah. I think I can understand, or if you're predicting this is going to happen again, I think program directors are worried about missed rotations. I think some program directors have been talking about doing shifts so that you're not missing a whole rotation. I'm just speaking until someone else starts to want to answer this question, but my understanding is that if you have teams, then they don't miss the entire rotation. They still have experience in that rotation, although it may not be as robust as before.
We also think that we may end up with certain residents having to leverage the fourth year, and they may have to do more clinical rotations than perhaps they were hoping to do more elective stuff. I think for this group of residents, I mean, the first years and second years, they've got time to catch up, but the third years, not necessarily so.
Does anybody else have ideas about that or want to speak?
Okay.
I think the CCC is going to have some interesting conversations. I think that we spoke about this last week, that's their job to assess competency. And if they feel that if some residents from lack of experience may have to extend training, that is the job of the CCC. All right, should we move on to mammography and iodine 131 requirements? Does anybody have a specific question that they want to ask the group? Just raise the hand. This was something that program directors asked to speak about, but we don't have the actual details of what you would like to know.
Dr. Ruckman, go for it. Rich, you should be allowed to talk.
Got it. So this wasn't my particular question, but we did discuss this with the board, and the issue is that as opposed to most other things that the ACGME mandates, MAMMO is governed by the FDA because of MQSA, and I-131 is governed by the NRC. So there isn't as much flexibility with this as there is with other ACGME requirements, which the ACGME can choose to relax or not, depending upon their feeling. And so if there are difficulties or decisions not to have residents on certain rotations, like nuclear medicine or mammography, then the question is, how will programs deal with those requirements which are outside of the ACGME purview? That's, I think, the issue that has arisen. I don't have a particular issue. I don't have a particular answer to it, but I think that's the question that all programs have to try to resolve.
Vicky Marks, you're open.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a very valuable resource on the acgme.org website. On their homepage, they have a link to their COVID information page. And on that page, they have a link to a robust list of letters that individual RRCs have sent to their constituents. So the radiology RRC has a letter to our specialty members that addresses both of those issues, although the answers aren't completely in. But the as far as meeting the mammography requirements for volume of studies, there is a statement in the letter indicating that resident interpretation of mammography studies that have actually been read previously but are now being presented in a blinded fashion to the resident for interpretation may be used to satisfy that requirement. As far as the I-131 clinical case, the 3 low dose and the 3 high dose cases, there is a statement from the ACGME that post-graduation documented supervised experience with those cases would be an acceptable meeting of that requirement, with the caveat from the ABR that as of the date that letter was posted, the American Board of Radiology Board of Governors had not yet signed off on that from the ABR point of view of including AU eligibility on the certificate. And I'm not quite, I don't have more recent information to see if that has come to pass.
There's some questions.
Yes, just a second. Sherry Jordan wanted to know if there is everyone requiring specific verbiage for the MAMMO read of already read sets of mammos, and how many residents can read the same MAMMO and still have it count? I mean, we do have, go ahead.
The RRC hasn't made any, I think it hasn't said anything as far as drilling down into those specifics. I think the important thing as a program director is that you're doing it in a way that makes you confident that the resident meets the requirement.
So we have the residents, they've been reading a set of screenings that we saved before they all disappeared off the soft copy workstation, and they have been rereading the same cases, but it doesn't matter, you know, the two sequential residents. We have a web-based database, NAC, which we've used for a bunch of different things, and one of the things on it is tracking their MAMMO reads, and they have to decide whether they're a callback or not. And then once they've gone through the set, they correlate it with the attendings reads for that. So we've been keeping our numbers, and that's all tracked, and that all goes into their MAMMO numbers way. And we've always done that. We've never had residents read before us because we read pretty much live. And it doesn't work with our system.
Yeah. So Asman Mian has a question. I know Tess and Vicky are both RRC members from our specialty. He has a question of how senior residents who are short of their 700-hour requirements and NUCs can meet this, given the impact of decreased volume. They said that they reached out to the ACGME and they passed the buck back to the RRC. Do you think
NRC
we have permission to do something?
ACGME is the RRC.
NRC.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm just reading from Vicky. I'm just reading the question out loud to you without edit, pardon me, but you're right.
Angelisa, it says NRC, not RRC.
Oh, okay, very good. I even have my glasses on, pardon me. So they passed the buck back to NRC. So they're concerned, can they do something similar to the mammography in which they assign previously read cases to those residents to fulfill the requirement? Do you have any advice on that?
Well, I mean, how far short are these people? These people are in their last 3 months of residency. They must have gotten hundreds of hours already, right? They weren't going to do the whole 700 hours in the last 3 months, were they?
No, I think they're just saying that they're worried about the 700 requirement, that they use, that they still are, that they're short. And so they're trying to come up with other mechanisms to meet those requirements.
Tess.
Boy, I don't have useful information here. This is a topic where I always defer to Liz Oates, who's a ABR and RRC. Actually, she just was rotating off the RRC member from NUCs. I mean, I think the requirement for the 700 hours still exists. Now, does it all have to be? I guess the 80 hours is the lectures, right? And the 700 hours is the clinical experience. I'm going to have to do some research and get back to you on how people could meet that. I don't have.
Tess.
Yeah, my understanding, to add to what Vicky is saying, is that it is still a firm requirement, and what all programs are recommended to do is pay some extra special attention to their graduating seniors and make sure that they get these experiences. The NRC, we can't necessarily speak to, but our understanding as far as the ACGME representatives, including Liz Oates, who was in contact with the NRC, gathered that the requirements will stay firm. Where they are flexible is in the radio tracer, the treatments that are required for AU status. Those can be done post-graduation, but I don't believe that the actual rotation hours can be done post-graduation.
So taking that out to a logical conclusion, it would have to be that residents in these last 3 months need to have NUCs rotations, right, Tess?
Correct. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. And if that can't be done, then the implication is that they would have to have their residency extended until they satisfy those nuclear medicine rotations.
Tess, would it count if they're doing NUCs rotations, but they're, reviewing databases of cases? Because if you haven't got enough cases, then there's no reason why they can't be doing that as long as it's NUCs, right?
Correct.
So, you know, we've got enough pet cases at the moment. We just got virtually nothing else. So we have one of our 2 residents or in-house at any one time, and the other one's at home studying nukes. Chuck?
Hi, thanks. I look at this as 2 issues. One of them is case logs, and the other one is rotations. So as far as the rotation is concerned, we have a virtual rotation that we've set up, and we have multiple residents on nuclear medicine at the same time, looking at whatever cases there are and whatever conferences we have and whatever material that we assign to them to read, so that they are absolutely fulfilling the 700-hour requirement. And I don't have any problem with that. There's a theoretical problem of case logs, making sure that each one has read enough cases. So we don't have any issues with that with PET CTs, which is where the case logs come in. As far as mammos are concerned, that's a little bit different. And we have a couple of senior residents who were actually short of their 300 because they were expecting to have more mammo rotations in the last 3 months. We are accommodating them by allowing them to do all of the cases that we have cataloged at the expense of more junior residents who are going to have to catch up some way next year.
We've also had residents coming in after hours when the reading room's free, you know, and assuming that they're taking the morning off and then coming in the evening to double read the cases then to get their numbers.
One more remark, if I could make that towards Chuck, and Vicki, feel free to jump in if I'm misrepresenting, but a lot of the current requirements by the ACGME are being forgiven during the time of COVID to allow for all of the challenges and distractions that we're enduring. And so in retrospect, a program would not be cited for delinquencies in a case log that, for instance, has a documented PET CT read for resident Dr. Jones of 20 to 25 instead of 30 if it's related to COVID. So those program regulations will be softer, in reviewing these programs that are affected in 2020.
Yeah, I agree with that. All of the case log numbers and minimums are being looked at very softly, and the ACGME has made it very clear that decreased not meeting minimums in a case log has no implication for the outcome of graduating of an individual resident. It's when over time a program has a pattern of not meeting case minimums that the ACGME worries about their capacity to train, but that is not going to be reviewed in any negative way during the COVID period.
Right. That being said, we should all try to get our residents as much PET CT as we can, but the program won't be dinged for that.
A couple of questions there. Angela.
Yes. So Kathleen Halton wanted to know who's responsible for the documentation of the iodine 31 completion if it's post-graduation, which I think is a great question. I'm not sure if anybody would have that answer.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, presumably that would still be done. I mean, the most logical process would be to have it signed off by the supervising nuclear radiologist or nuclear medicine physician, and then co-signed by the prior program director.
So same.
Just any type of written documentation of the involvement and supervision would be appropriate.
Okay, and then Sherry Jordan is asking, is everyone requiring specific verbiage for the mammo read of already read set mammals? We talked about that a little bit earlier.
Again, the written policies regarding this don't get into the weeds to that degree. I think, again, if the supervising site director documents that the resident got the satisfactory experience in that image interpretation and decision-making training, then that should suffice.
Perfect.
Agreed.
Thanks.
I will add this, that in ADS, all program directors can document the adjustments that they're making related to COVID, so that would be helpful. So you could mention it in that context.
Oh, that's a great suggestion. Thanks. All right, good. We have about 5 more minutes. I know interviews are a ways away, but with the news predicting that we may have second waves, Petra and I thought it would be helpful to just pose to this group, are people going to be primarily thinking of remote type interviews? Are people going to be planning both? I just admire all of you. I know this is a huge amount of work that you've already put in for COVID, but since there's a lot of uncertainty, does anybody want to share how they're even thinking about the future of this year?
There's 54 people here. Someone must have some thoughts.
The other thing Petra and I thought of is that maybe just at this time we wait and maybe do it later in the summer. But I think a lot of people have been sharing that even if everything looks great, there may be a state, as you know, all states have different experiences with COVID. And so there have been program directors that have emailed me with concern that their state may still be having difficulty versus maybe Washington State is open. So how will they compete? And so I just think it's a really interesting to just pose the question and to start having us think about it as leaders.
Angelisa.
That is a really interesting question. It makes me wonder if for equity across the board, there should be some global decision for mandating remote interviews or something like that. This is really complicated when you think about all the different ramifications and different states involved and biases. And you know, we might be more inclined to rank highly those candidates that we get to meet in person because it's harder to get to know somebody remotely. And on the flip side, they're not going to be as familiar with different programs if they can't come visit.
Right. I've had 2 New York program directors specifically email me with concern because of their experiences and their concern that by September, they're not clearly seeing a way of hosting without, you know, so I just think Petra and I wanted to pose this and to start having people think about it, and we may need to have a different conversation at a different time. But it wouldn't, to your point, Tess, I think equity, and it's not fair to the programs, and it's really not fair to the applicants, in my opinion, either.
Karen, sorry, who do I have here? Karen?
Yeah, this is Karen Johnson again from Duke. Actually, I raised my hand before you all started talking about the equity thing, and that's just that was the first thought that popped into my mind. I haven't given any consideration at all to interviews in the winter, but when this conversation came up, my first thought that was, whatever, if anyone has to do it remotely, I feel like as a group, we should all be doing it remotely, because it's just not fair to those programs that would have to do it remotely for safety reasons or for whatever other reason.
So Rich, as a almost APDR president, what do you think about the AP?
Well, Vicky's on here too as well. She's the president.
I don't know, whoever wants to speak. Rich had his hand up as well.
So I actually have always been felt that the interview process was highly flawed. You know, when you think about how a lot of organizations hire people, there's a very exhaustive interview process. We interview people, a large group of them, over a short amount of time, and then make really colossal decisions based on those really short interactions, no matter how thoughtful we think we are. And the interview process itself may take on a greater importance without having USMLE data, which also, so the whole issue of equity plays into all of these. One of the reasons for decreasing our reliance, or the decision not to allow us to see USMLE data, was based on questions of equity and diversity. And the same thing, I think, can start to apply as far as interviews are concerned.
Yeah.
And I've always been concerned about the financial equity issue, that these interviews, you have medical students who in some cases are hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And now they're interviewing all over the country in a lot of places. It must cost an absolute fortune. So there's a positive aspect, I think, to this remote interviewing, but you know, it is early in the game, and also there's very little time left in the session. I think this really deserves a lot of thoughtful discussion.
Yeah, we were thinking that perhaps we should have a session purely devoted to this topic, maybe when people think would be appropriate, but perhaps beginning of July.
Yeah.
I think it's a really important issue, and I think the concept of that we should all do the same thing is a very important point. I'm actually going to be on a conference call with the Organization of Program Directors tomorrow morning, and it'll be interesting to see what people in other disciplines are thinking. I'll make sure to bring this up. But yes, I think developing a residency-wide plan, not just with APDR, but with APDIR would be a good collaborative thing to do.
Carol Gear.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was going to say, at least our leadership, GMEC last week brought this up at Wake Forest, and we're not in one of the hot spots at the moment. And they already sort of said to us that they're probably not going to be in favor of Wake Forest bringing applicants from all over the country in. So we're in a place where it's not even a hot spot. So I think when your leadership starts talking about it, I think we're gonna, I don't know. I agree with everything that Karen and Vicki and everybody said. There's going to be equity issues, but I think that when you really wrap your head around it and you talk about people flying all over the country, coming into your environment for, 24 hours and leaving, I don't know if we're gonna be ready for all that. And maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. No, I think you are completely correct. And that's why Petra and I wanted to bring it up and to have people start thinking about it. Our time is up.
With the hands up, should we just take those last two comments? We have Chuck and Sherry Jordan, and then we'll finish up. Does that sound all right?
Thanks. But, I'll try to be brief, even though it's kind of hard, because you may or may not remember several years back, there was a push by at least one person and maybe more to have interviews for residency positions at RSNA such that we could save medical students from having to spend a lot of money traveling all over the country.
Yes.
And that was overwhelmingly turned down. And the biggest reason, and one that I think is very important, is the applicants would not get a chance to see your campus and meet your residents. And those are key issues in trying to decide if a candidate is somebody that you want in your program. And the same thing is happening now with seniors in high school who have to look at, or juniors in high school who have to look at college campuses. Imagine trying to choose the college that you want to go to without ever having set foot on the campus and doing some virtual tour and meeting one guide of some sort. So I think this would be an absolute last resort if we had to say that every program is restricted from having people visit their campus.
Sherry?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, much like Wake Forest and Carol's experience at UNC, we just received notification from the deans that ARIS is likely to be delayed, although they don't have a sense exactly of how long it's going to be delayed, and therefore interview seasons will be changed. And they are actually already preparing to do AAMC endorsed medical school interviews entirely virtually. So granted, this is UME, not necessarily GME, but that information has already been disseminated to all of our medical students, including our fourth-year medical students at UNC.
Yeah.
So it's going to be an upstream impact that is already being talked about.
Good. Well, thank you, everybody. I think it's time to close. And I think if there's interest, we'll send out an email to everyone in July as things start to be more distilled, as well as it would be a great conversation for leadership in APDR and APDIR. And I look forward to hearing Vicki and when she speaks to other programs tomorrow. I think we'll start to get more clear ideas of a way to move forward.
All right.
I do want to reiterate, I still think it would be really unfair to have some programs be able to interview and others not.
I think so.
Well, now that we're all doing Zoom happy hours, maybe the residents can get to know each other that way.
No,
I agree. No, absolutely. All right, everybody.
Yeah, thank you all for doing this.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Take care, everybody.